Okay, thank you very much, Dean Kim, for your very generous introduction. As he mentioned, as far as I know, the only distinguished scholars are invited in colloquium, but I'm not sure if I'm such a distinguished man. But thank you very much for the invitation. Particularly, I heard that this is the first colloquium for this semester, and it's a great honor and pleasure to give you a lecture about human rights. No, we'll talk about human rights today. This is the issue of interest of mine for many years. Almost 20 years I've been thinking about human rights, do research on human rights, and also as an activist, I have participated in various kinds of advocacy related to human rights. So I'd like to share some of my ideas and some of my thoughts about human rights, particularly focusing on Asia. There are basically two questions that I'd like to propose today. Probably at the end of the lecture, you can answer to those questions for yourself. The first one is, why human rights now? It seems like more people are talking about human rights. More people are interested in human rights. More people are working in the area of human rights. More scholars are doing researches on human rights. Okay. I'm personally very curious why human rights became the important issue in 21st century. Related to that question, second question is about the human rights in Asia. Because Asia is known the only region where there are no regional level human rights protection mechanisms. Okay. For example, in Europe, in Africa, in America, there are regional human rights regimes, but not in Asia. So I'd like to ask you and think about why we don't have it and how we can establish such a regional human rights mechanisms. Okay, those two questions are proposed. First of all, let's see what's a situation in Asia. And just wrote down the problems of human rights. There are more human rights violations in the region of Asia than any other part of the world. Okay. There are more people who don't get respect in terms of human rights, and not only get the protection, but they don't have a regional mechanisms. They don't think about human rights. Okay, so here we have the religious conflicts. There are human trafficking, forced labor, sexual exploitation, caste system we still have in many Asian countries. There are refugee problems. And there's all kinds of human rights problems in Asia. Okay. Then we will further discuss about Asian human rights. But before that, I'd like to give you a very basic human rights lecture. First, basic properties of human rights. I don't know how much you are interested in human rights. I said more people are interested in human rights now. That means, as a student of Graduate School of International Studies, I do believe many of you are interested in human rights. Let me ask you one question. How many of you here read Universal Declaration of Human Rights? You know the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? You know what that is? How many of you ever read that 30 articles of UDHR? There are three students here. Okay. It's such a shame. Okay, so I have to give you a very basic human rights. Okay, I talk about, right now here, the universality, inherency, indivisibility. Okay. Many people say human rights are universal. Okay. As written in Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it implies human rights are universal, meaning that everybody, every single human being has same human rights wherever, whenever. Okay? So wherever means whether you live in Korea, you live in Africa, you live in Latin America, everybody has the same human rights. And whenever, okay, whether you live 18th century, whether you live in 21st century, as a human being, everybody has the same rights. Right? That's the meaning of universality. Okay? That's actually controversial. Okay? Because many people think that different cultures have a different ethics, different moralities. So human rights can be different. And human rights in 18th century is different from human rights in 21st century. Okay? We used to have slaves in 18th century, but we don't have it. Okay? Women didn't have voting rights in 18th century, but now every woman has voting rights. How can you say it's the same? But on the other hand, as a human being, in principle, should have the same human rights. Okay? But it's controversial. I will discuss more about universality of human rights in later part of the lecture, but that's the meaning of universality. So the human rights guys, human rights people, firmly believe that human rights should be universal, if not universal now. Okay? And inherency. You have a human rights from birth, from your birth. Okay? You are born with the human rights. Nobody gives you human rights. You just have it. It's given. Okay? It's different from other rights. Okay? When you have a rights as a Korea University student, okay, president of Korea University give you a right to become a Korea University student. But in case of human rights, nobody gives you a right. Okay, so you say inalienable. Because it's inherent, nobody can deprive your rights. It's inalienable. That's another the principle. And third one is, actually it's very important in my opinion, is indivisibility. Okay. There are many kinds of human rights. For example, we have a freedom of speech, voting rights, we have a right to food, right to health, right to education. There are various kinds of human rights, but those human rights are interdependent and cannot be separated. Any human rights is more important than any other right. Okay? So it cannot be separated. Indivisibility cannot be indivisible. Okay? This one is also controversial. Because there are some conflicts among the rights. For example, these days we're talking about the putting CCTVs on the children care center. Right? There's a big issue in Korea. because some teachers are abusing the child, so it's an issue. But putting CCTV in working place is a violation of privacy. Okay? Privacy is very important in human rights. Okay? But because of which one is more important, right of a child or your privacy? Okay? It's a little bit of controversy. Okay? But in principle, the human rights people say human rights are indivisible. It cannot be separated. It's interdependent. Okay? When you should have a right to food in order to have a freedom of expression. Okay? You need to have a right to education to become a citizen and have a voting rights. So it's all interdependent and indivisible. That's the principle. Okay? So 3 properties of human rights you should know. And brief history, even if it's a very long history of human rights, actually every culture, every religion, and every tradition has the properties of human rights. Every culture, every civilization actually respect for human dignity. They have traditions. Particularly in European society, there's a long history of human rights. Okay? From Magna Carta, from the Enlightenment movements, there is the French Revolution. There's interest in modern era, particularly. There's interest about the individual freedom. Okay? So starting from individual liberty, reason, freedom, they've been thinking about human rights. Okay? But Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is most important document in the history of human rights, is enacted in 1948, right after the end of Second World War. Okay? So this is the most important document. That's why I'm asking you how many of you have read this UDHR, but only 3 of you. So, my assignment is please go back to your house and try to read the UDHR. There's only 30 articles of UDHR, and it's been translated into more than 200 languages, and it is read by more people than Bible says. So it's a very popular document and very well written. So anyway, this is very important. And there is International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Both are enacted in 1966, but ratified in 1976. So including UDHR, ICCPR, ESCR, we say International Bill of Human Rights. Okay? So this is a foundation of international human rights law. Okay? And since then, we have an increased number and range of treaties elucidate or add to principle of UDHR. You have many treaties, many institutions, conventions, but these 3 are very important. So we say it's the International Bill of Human Rights. And we have a UN Human Rights Council. As Dean introduced, I became the member of UN Human Rights Council Advisory Committee. It's a great honor. So I participated in the committee last month, actually, in Geneva. So it's a great opportunity, a great experience to learn more about the human rights mechanisms, and also a good opportunity to contribute to the global human rights. So it's a great honor for me. Anyway, UN Human Rights Council was established in 2006, and it has various activities to promote and protect human rights in the globe. And we have an International Criminal Court, so-called ICC, and bunch of treaty bodies. For example, International Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, about discrimination against women, and right of child, etc. So, no, these treaties, treaties is basically, agreement among the states, right? So it's sort of a binding treaty. So states should abide by the charters, by the conventions. Okay? Then, even if we have well-established international human rights regime, at the same time, there are various kinds of regional human rights regime. This is an area where I'm interested in, So as I said here, there's a European regime, the European Convention on Human Rights. There's a European Court of the Human Rights. And we do have American Convention on Human Rights, African Charter on Human and People's Rights. And also in the Arab League, there's an Arab Charter on Human Rights, even if it is not very well established, but still have it. But in Asia, it's the only reason where human rights regime is not established. So how can you make it? If you think it is very important, Asia is a serious area where there are too many human rights violations, then we need to have a regional level protection mechanisms. Then how can you make it? So that's the issue of my interest. Okay. And I said here, formation of human rights protection mechanism in Asia at the state level can hardly be established. Okay. So, okay, I will speak about later more. And here I briefly want to talk about national human rights institutions. ICC, this ICC is not International Criminal Court. This is the International Coordinating Committee. International Coordinating Committee for National Human Rights Institutions. One of the recent creative mechanisms that the global human rights people created is a national human rights institutions. The ICC was established in 1993. Then, since then, there are increasing number of national human rights institutions, meaning that each state has their own human rights institutions, which is independent, which is taking care of our human rights issues of each country. So it has huge contributions to the global human rights improvement. There's also APF, Asia Pacific Forum, which are also Association of National Human Rights Institutions in Asia Pacific area. Let's see. There are a bunch of national human rights institutions in Asia. Okay. Most Asian countries, I think, they do have now the national human rights institutions. Okay. And you may wonder why we still have so many human rights problems when they do have human rights institutions at the national level. Okay. A simple answer is that they do not work very well. Right? But those who argue for the national human rights institutions, because of the establishment of national human rights institutions, human rights became better, okay, than without. But anyway, there's an increasing number of NHRI in Asia. Then I'd like to talk about AICHR, AICHR, which is ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. Yes, we actually do have the regional level human rights mechanism in Southeast Asian countries, which is ASEAN, right? The purpose of HR is to promote and protect human rights and fundamental freedom of peoples of ASEAN. And their discussion started in the 1990s, and 2007, there was an Asian Charter was adopted. And Article 14 in Asian Charter, it says, in conformity with the purposes and principles of ASEAN Charter relating to promotion and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms, ASEAN shall establish an ASEAN human rights body. Okay? That's in ASEAN Charter. Okay? In October 2009, ICHR, which is the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, was established. Okay? It's a very interesting. Okay? Think about this. ASEAN countries, most ASEAN countries are authoritarian states. How many people are from ASEAN countries here? Is there anyone? Only 1, 2, 3? Okay. So I cannot bash the ASEAN countries. I need to be very careful. But most states are authoritarian and they are violating human rights. And making this kind of regional mechanisms, their activities are constrained, then why do they make this kind of mechanism? Why do you think they make this one? I mean, ASEAN countries, why they made this one? Looks good. Huh? There are too many problems. They think they need this. I don't think that, because this is established by the states, governments. Okay, but governments, as I said, actually, violating human rights. Then they say for the people of the ASEAN and their fundamental freedoms, they do make, this is a very good answer actually, what he said. It looks good. Okay? ASEAN countries, they made this. Okay? And there are actually the pressure from other countries, particularly European countries. They continue to say, you should do something for the human rights. Okay? So this is a very good reason. So then, when there is a pressure from outside, do you think countries will make human rights mechanisms? Is it going to be only reason? Think about it. Okay, let me ask you another question. Many people these days interested in the international development cooperation. I know many of you are planning to major in international development cooperation here. And you know that there are increasing number of ODAs. Right? Even in South Korea joined OECD DAC, Development DAC Committee, Development Assistance Committee of OECD, and they promised to increase rapidly the ODA. Why do you think countries continue to provide more ODAs to other countries? What's the motivation? Because it's official development assistance, ODA, meaning that they give taxpayers' money to other countries. Right? I'm a South Korean. I pay tax to my government, and my money is going to other countries when I'm still hungry. Okay? Why people allow that happen. European countries, I know they are more affluent, but still they do have their problems. They're facing the economic difficulties for themselves, but they continue to expand the number of ODAs for other countries. What's the motivation of the state? You got to answer. I'm not going to give you a lecture if you don't answer. Political and economic reasons. What kind of political reasons?
Politically, they bond together. Maybe they go together with other countries from others.
As taxpayer, do you really think that my money is, going to other countries is good for, political whatever cooperation? Are you happy?
I think I have responsibility.
You think you have responsibility? Okay. Yes.
All humans have human rights.
Uh-huh.
Cooperating in cooperation with other human rights are right.
Very, very idealistic. Huh?
More than any other reason, I guess, governments are trying to expand their economic influences on the recipient countries.
Oh, that's a good answer, right? We're going right direction. So they are concerned with their national interest, right? So by providing ODA to a particular nation state, eventually we can get more economic benefits from that country. Okay? So for South Korea, for example, Korean government, in terms of a national interest, it will benefit Korean interests eventually. So they continue to increase. Okay, that's one of the reasons, but not all of them. Okay? That's one of the motivations. Okay? But that doesn't explain everything. Okay? Because in many cases, they continue to provide unbinding multilateral the donations, ODAs. So national interest calculation is not the only reason. Okay? Again here, there's a pressure from other countries. Okay? I think it's very important, as he mentioned, why we make ICHR in Asian countries. Okay? Other countries, other advanced countries, okay, continue to pressure. Okay? So we have to do it. So Korean case, we as a advancing economic country in Korea, they do have a responsibility. Otherwise, other countries will bashing Korea. Then, lastly, in my opinion, there is some students have idealistic ideas. There is pressure from so-called global civil society. So new ideas. As somebody mentioned, it's a responsibility, global responsibility of advanced countries to contribute to the less developed part of the world. Nothing to do with the national interest. Korean civil society pressure Korean government. You should do it. It's not Korea, it's for the world, global society. So that's we so-called bottom up. From the bottom, grassroots people believe they have new ideas, new thoughts, new norms about the global society. We have to do something for others across national boundaries. That's a new trend. So maybe when you think of ICHR or Asian human rights mechanism in general, we can think of whether we have that kind of bottom-up pressure. But in case of ASEAN, in case of ICHR, I don't think there is any pressure from the bottom. Okay? Because ASEAN countries, people in ASEAN countries, the civil society has not grown that much. Okay? Probably they are mostly thinking about their national interest. Okay? By making this, as he mentioned, they can show that we are doing this. Okay? We are respectful countries. Okay? So here, most important one is, even if they establish this, most important principle is principle of non-intervention. Okay? Principle of non-intervention. Okay? You know, when you have human rights protection mechanisms, most serious human rights violators are states, governments. But when you emphasize non-intervention, then that intergovernmental institution is powerless, right? Let's say there is a Myanmar. Myanmar is violating human rights. We have an ICHR, but ICHR is not supposed to intervene in Myanmar matters. That even if they do have institutions, that institution is powerless. Okay? So that's the problem of ICHR. So there is a long way to go to have well-established human rights protection mechanisms in ASEAN. But nonetheless, this is very important progress in terms of human rights mechanisms. We have an ASEAN Human Rights Declaration in 2012. Okay? So it has a much limit, but it's a cornerstone, and there is a future. So we have to start from here, but there is limitations, I would say. So mostly state-centric. Okay. Then, what time is it now? I can't see. Do you have time? So when, how many time I have? Maximum 10 minutes. 10 minutes? Okay, forget about refugees. Move toward. I just want to say this. Okay, here, in terms of refugee, most people think that there are more refugees in Africa. But actually, there are more refugees in Asia Pacific than Africa. Okay? And almost half of global refugees are located in Asia. But people are not aware of it. Okay? And the refugees in Asia is the least protected refugees. People do not care of refugees in Asia. But anyway, that's what I was thinking about. Toward better human rights in Asia, I need 1 hour to complete this. Okay, 10 minutes. Okay. Okay, let's see this. Some of you are taking my class. Maybe see how many of you are taking my class or have taken my class. Okay, so less than half. Okay. Those who took my class are familiar with this history. Okay. I simplified the global history. So I put 17th century and 21st century, okay, and I divided into pre-modern and modern. Okay. And then officially in international relation theories, 1648 is the year that modern nation-state system started. Okay. And then in modern era, nation-states are most important actors in international community. Okay. Even now, there is a debate whether we are moving toward postmodern or we're still living in modern. Okay. In between. But in my opinion, it's going toward postmodern. Okay? So modern nation-state system is going to be the past. in due course. So in postmodern, not only nation states, but diverse actors, other states are emerging. So that's why we need a new system. Okay, new system is called for. But we still have states, in case of human rights mechanisms, we talk about Human Rights Council, treaties. Okay, all human rights institutions are basically based on nation-state system. Actors are all nation states. Nation states, governments are signing the treaty, right? But anyway, we're living here, but we tour here. Okay? Then most important principle in modern society is national sovereignty. Okay? Every state is independent. Every state is not supposed to be intervened. Okay, that's a very important principle. At the same time, particularly after end of Second World War, important principle for United Nations is human rights, respect for individual human rights, universal, inherent, indivisible. Okay. But then what happens when there is a human rights violations in other countries? We have to respect their sovereignty, or we have to respect human rights. Okay. In modern society, national sovereignty is more important. But now, if you look at the trends, what's happening, okay, humanitarian intervention or R2P, what is that R2P? Responsibility to protect. You know what is the responsibility to protect? I don't have enough time to explain if you don't study for yourself, okay? So in certain cases, nation states intervene in another state's matters, okay? That's the responsibility to protect related. That's the change, right? So the first question that I raised, why human rights now? Why people are more interested in human rights? I think it's very related to the change of global environment. Okay. So, the increasing number of actors and also respect of human rights is more important than national sovereignty. Okay. So, in the past, even in Cold War era, in 50s, 60s, 70s, okay, even if human rights are very important, the ethics, they did not talk about it because they are more concerned with security matters. But now it's changing. So here, I call it the Westphalian system, modern nation-state system. Okay, government has the highest absolute authority, but now we have changing. There's a transformation of power. Nation is no longer only most powerful actor. Now, even some NGOs became very powerful. Okay. The source of power for NGO is not the military capabilities or economic capabilities. The source of power for them is information. Okay. When you know more, when you have knowledge, when you have a network, and you become very powerful. So even small NGO, which doesn't have military capabilities, can exercise their power in this 21st century. Okay. But anyway, then how can you give me 5 more minutes, okay. How can you make a regional level institution? Okay. I say here, West is different from East. Okay. The governance transition. Okay. We try to learn from Western experience, okay, because Western society, they have established European Union, they have a European Court of Human Rights, well established. Okay. But there's 2 reasons we cannot exactly learn same thing from the West. First of all, when European countries have established their human rights mechanisms, there's a principles of modern society. There is collaboration among the states was quite possible. So with the negotiating agreement among the states, they were able to establish human rights regime. And also there are cultural, traditional, ideological similarities among the states, but not in East Asia. So I say here, oh, let's forget about this. You study for yourself at home. Okay, actually this is important. Let's say this is a mono-hub network, multi-hub network. It's a post-hub network. This is empire, for example, Rome Empire. So Rome has only sovereignty. All other actors are dependent on Rome, right? This is empire system. This is nation-state system. Okay, there's a hub, government, okay, and all other domestic actors are dependent on government. International is relations among the governments, right? This is the modern era. But now we don't have a hub, 21st century. Okay? There is a government, but many actors, regardless of their governments, they are interacting with all different kinds of actors. Okay? That's a post-hub. So here, this post-hub, we're moving toward post-hub here in post-hub. Not only states, individuals, international organizations, private corporations, they are interacting. Okay? Meaning that they are participating in making new norms of new system. Okay? So when you think of human rights regimes or human rights institutions, you should forget that only states can make it. Okay? Because we're living in different environment. European societies, they do have a human rights mechanisms made by through the cooperation of nation states, governments. But we cannot do it. We don't have to do it. Okay? Other actors like NGO can participate in making regimes. Okay? That's a change. There's a fundamental change going on, okay, in global society. Okay. And there are many cases, in fact, that NGOs are contributing to making global norms. Okay. I don't have enough time to explain it. So, Western entity of governance, so we think the states interact and they make some institution. This idea. That's what has been done so far. UN mechanisms. UN is members of UN are states. Okay. Non-governmental organizations are not a member of United Nations. Okay? So European Union members are states, European Court states. Okay? That's what we understand. We know, right? But in East Asia, we are different. Okay? We are living in different international environment. Our traditions are different. Okay? So we have to go through the different paths. Okay? So, this question, second question I raised, how we can make regional mechanisms in Asia, actually answers up to you. I cannot provide complete answer. But one thing is, East is different from the West. Okay? And because of change of international global environment, political environment, okay, we have to concern with other actors than nation states in making the global norms and regimes. Okay? So I cannot explain all those breaching social capital, etc. But what I'm trying to say is so-called bottom-up approach important. Okay? So role of NGOs is going to be important, and awareness, education, communication, okay, through the diverse actors are extremely important in this global and also regional level. Okay. So I have established a human rights NGO in 2006 called Human Asia, and I hope you I hope you show more interest in my NGO. Human Asia has the collaboration with GSIS, and we have various activities together, particularly education program. One of the things is, actually next Monday, we do have the human rights the workshop in the third floor, but that workshop is conducted in Korean, so English-speaking people cannot participate. But every month we do have a workshop. And also one announcement is in July 30th, in the summer vacation, July 30th and 31st, Human Asia offers Model UN Human Rights Council Universal Periodic Review. Okay. So it's a sort of a competition. The students participate, you can apply for that competition. So each country, we take care of North Korea, South Korea, Japan, and China, and 12 students will compose one representative of one state. So 48 students will join in the competition. So we do have actual UPR, Universal Periodic Review. If you don't know UPR, maybe most of you don't know about UPR. You have to study what that is. Anyway, we do have a very interesting model UPR in July. So I'm not supposed to advertise in the lecture, but for the education purpose, I think it's a great opportunity, so I'm explaining. Anyway, I established Human Asia for fundamental goal of Human Asia to establish the regional level human rights protection mechanisms. Okay? And I do believe, as I briefly explained, there's a lot of role that NGO can do in making human rights regimes. So that's why I'm doing it. And the activities is not just making voices, but it includes humanitarian aid, education, advocacy, and various issues. So, in conclusion, global governance, when you say global governance, it's related to declining state power provides non-state actors with power and opportunity to show their interests, increase power and influence of non-state actors. Okay, that's the conclusion here. Then, as I said, if there's a top-down by the government and there is bottom-up process, and human rights regime in Asia needs to be established through bottom-up efforts of NGOs. Okay, that's my opinion. And there are more slides, but I know we don't have time, so you can read for yourself. And I'm briefly talking about Human Asia. You can look into our webpage. If you type humanasia.org, we do have advocacy and campaign, field research and humanitarian aid, and human rights education and training programs. So I hope you can join all our activities. So I have to stop here. Thank you very much, Dean, again. Yeah, thank you very much for listening.